Hey, thanks for tuning in. Getting set up a little bit, running a little low. Today I'll be continuing some work that I was doing on Drupal Commerce last week, where I created a new module called Commerce Conditions Plus. And the idea is that it provides a more robust user interface for the conditions plugins inside of Drupal Commerce. And these condition plugins are used in promotions for deciding what shipping methods available, just about a lot of different areas that need, selection logic. My local environment's taken a little bit to wake up. Here we go. Looks like it's finally awake. So last week we went through changing. If we look at, so this is the current user interface that I've been working on, where it says condition name, settings. You choose an item. So we'll pick customer ID. We click add, and it will add it into this table. And with that, then we have a way that we can add compounding conditions. The current setup, if we go to shipping methods, might have to give Docker a reboot if it's going this slow. So currently, if you edit a conditions setup, you'll get this current tab structure where you pick customer ID, you check the checkbox, the Ajax loads, and you select multiple customers. So this does allow you to do a comma separated list to add a bunch of them, but it's not necessarily intuitive. So the idea here is that we will create a list that keeps going through, and you can keep adding more conditions. But where I left off is this isn't actually working the right way, right? In this other form, we're getting an autocomplete on the customer ID. And if you'll notice here, we're just getting a regular text field. That's because if we jump into our setup here, so how it's working is in promotions. This is a base field on the promotion entity. And we're telling that base field in this hook alter to use our custom widget, which is here, and is actually just a pass through to pass the conditions table. Because inside commerce itself, it is actually a table. Sorry, not a table, it is a form element. And we're just following the same paradigms because then we can swap it out in other areas as well. So what was going on is you can see in this, let me shrink down this sidebar a bit. So inside of here, this is where we're building the inline form for the plugin condition, but it's inside settings and data. This is not working because it's actually deferring the build into the render system outside of the form builder. So that's why the form's not complete, because it's being rendered as if it was regular HTML and not part of the actual form. So the next step is to get all of this working correctly. And there's a few approaches we could take. We could borrow from if I go to content types, I'm going to open up a few quick tabs. So we can borrow from the display concept where you render in a summary with the select list, and then you click this like a cog that does an Ajax operation and loads it in. We actually copied this same approach in the checkout flows where we could have this list. This way we could implement a draggable interface so you could rearrange things. And again, you would have to click a checkbox to load in the setting, and then you can click cancel. Or another approach is how we handle product attributes, where this is kind of the approach that's going right now, where there's just a list of the actual raw values right there that you can edit. So I'm going to have to make a decision on what's the best approach. Is it one where we say condition name and then we show a summary in the edit form? Off the bat, I think I was going to just go with like on the product attributes where we just list the values here and it's just an open edit. But I actually want to go through and evaluate that. So last time I left a note here. So in product attribute form, let's look at build values form. That is where we're located. So this is what builds that values. So we have values. It's a table, which is what we have. Header, it has a table drag. So this is exactly what we want to copy, is this exact setup, and this is what we want to leverage. So we have, I'm going to see if I can do a split and move right, and if we can read this decently. All right. So in here, process conditions, table. So here we have a table. We have a header. They have the value. They have the weight. No, I should add the, does this have the use? Should actually be wrapping this in translation. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh, actually we're in a static method, so we just do T. So we have condition name, we have settings. You know, we'll go ahead and copy the weight. As well, and try to, no, I'm going to stop getting ahead of myself, and we're going to take one thing at a time. Make it be configurable, and then make it so we can rearrange the orderings. And that's where here, like relationship sibling, this is where eventually we can make it that they're nested. So wait, there's a suffix for the ID, for the wrapper ID, which is the Ajax wrapper on product attributes. Input defaults to true, which breaks file fields on the value form. This table is used for visual grouping only. The element itself doesn't have any values it needs processing. That seems like a valuable thing to copy. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Let's see. I'm going to also copy just this line and do a search in the Drupal code base and see where else it's used. So here it's used as an item. It's a pure wrapping with heading, ignores value. Text type custom does the same thing in the table. So and token tree table does the same as well with its table. So it makes me curious, if I were to open the table render element, does it by default have input to true? So I'm going to scroll up, it remembered my space. So when you go to a render element or form element, inside get info, you can read all the data. And right here, it does have input set to true. So let's turn that off. And now we'll go through. So we have this. By this, I mean we have our table definition, that table definition for each value map, which is actually what's going on in here for each conditions. And in here we have form values index. Oh, I see what we need to do. Or at least I believe what we need to do. So in here, it's actually adding, so value form, it's instead of appending items to the rows, it's adding it as child elements. And maybe that's one of the tricks. So when working with elements in Drupal, such as like radios or checkboxes, you can actually manipulate the child values by adding like regular array values at the end of it. So let's see. So form values, we have element condition plugins. Let's copy some of this flow a bit. So let's call this condition form, and we're going to pass it by reference to here. Let's do conditions as index, well, value map. I think that conditions though will be, now let's do as index, and then eventually I'll turn on Xdebug and we'll see how far this goes. So the value form, why don't we go ahead and we'll copy this where it adds the table drag. We're not going to render this right now, but so let's actually just cut it out. I keep on a jump ahead of myself. So let's wait to do that. If ID is equal to new, that's because in the attribute form, if I go back to it, let's go here. It always ensures that there is a, add new has the ID equal that. So that's where it creates this default value. So let's see here. So it gets the value, we get the inline form here, which is what we've done. So we're going to have to make some changes right in here. So let's see. So it has, let's read the comment here. Value form table drag is markup. Add a table drag element. The table drag element is always added to the first cell in the row, so we can have an empty cell to guide it there. So what we'll want to do, instead of this operation here, we will do condition form, and we're just going to call it, what is this? How do we have it? We had it the label. So let's call it label equals, and here we have parents inline form value weight. So we'll actually just copy this here. So by putting it as a child element, it's going to cause the form to render it properly instead of delegating it to the render array, is what we're having by putting it as a sub element in the table, rather as a row. So that way it will be processed immediately by the form builder and not in Drupal's render system. And if you're curious about the stop equals null, this is my little workaround because you can't do a breakpoint on an empty line. And sometimes when you put a breakpoint on an array declaration, it gets weird. So I just always do the stop equals null. It's harmless, and it's a way for me to drop a breakpoint where I need to do a breakpoint. So now we're here, and as you'll see in this part, we have value form entity, parents, and inline form, which inline form is create instance. So we have plugin configuration form right here. So let's go ahead and do condition form. We'll call it settings equals an array. And based off of this, build inline entity form, we'll have this equal value form entity we would have it be inline form build inline form, and it's the plugin configuration form value form entity. No. That's right. You have to like have it redefine itself. So let's copy. We'll cut this. Let's move it down here. Is immediately overridden. I know I don't necessarily like that. Why do we need? Why isn't it even giving that same warning here? It should do the same inspection, so that's where I feel like maybe I'm. Oh, I wonder if. Neat. So that actually causes it to realize that we're consuming. So if you didn't catch that, let me put this back over here. So when I changed this to be from the plugin configuration form, it said, hey, you're immediately overriding it. But once I passed it into this function, it realized that, oh, you're using the value. So let's delete this line here, and we pass in the form state. All right, so this now has been updated and it should be working. So let's flip on xdebug and ddev xdebug, make sure I've got it running correctly. I quit Todoist. All right, so xdebug's enabled. And let's see what happens when we refresh this form. 1 second, let me make sure I have the listener on. All right, we're gonna refresh and try to build out this form, and hopefully it works. This is inside the inline form. I'm gonna actually skip this part. I had that breakpoint last time for something more in depth. So now we're in the element. Let's see, I'll bring this over. So let's pick this, let's do customer role. We're gonna click add, and our breakpoint should catch. There we go. where now condition form is null, which that feels like why in here index form values. So is that actually happening in here where value form is null and then it's magically converted into an array? I just want to go check this and see if it's the same error because that just feels wrong. We should do a what operator to, it does. Okay. So what I'm going to do is add a what operator. I don't know what you call it. That's what I call the double question mark. I think I got that via from like Larry Garfield when he wrote his like introduction to PHP 7. In here, only variables can be passed by reference. Okay, that's why. So it just feels weird that we have it as null and it's just working. So what I would rather do is if not set. So if this isn't set, which it's not going to be, we'll do. So let's at least instantiate it as an empty array. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly cautious, but I just don't like. I don't like the fact that it's null and then we're turning it into an array magically because PHP allows it. As I've begun working more and more on items, I don't like randomly things turning into different types. Like see here, this is on the product attribute form still. So value form is null, but as soon as we step over this line, boom, it magically converts into an array. I don't necessarily like that happening. And just in case we ever leverage more type or strict types in PHP, like maybe even PHP 8, that's going to throw a warning. Well, let's be ahead of ourselves and catch that. So I'm going to put the breakpoint here again. I'm going to click add. So we see in here, so if we go to element and we do condition plugins, which should be the bottom, we'll see that there is no entry for index, which is, where's ABCD 0. So we default it to be an empty array. And then we create our shortcut. So condition form is just basically a shortcut. We're passing that array by reference, so it's easier to shove data into it. So we get our inline form for the plugin condition. If you didn't catch the last stream, Commerce has its own inline form API, which could be like inline entity form 2.0 if we wanted it to. We leveraged a lot of sub elements and sub elements on top of sub elements, and we broke the form API. Like eventually it just stopped working for us. So this was Boyan's workaround to make it all actually work and leverage Ajax properly. We got to a point where Ajax and Form API didn't work in Commerce because we were too many levels deep with custom form elements. So we're at our stop null. We have the close element. We have the condition form. So the label is our markup of customer role. Our settings is the embedded form. So we should see form here, role, checkboxes. All right, I'm going to press play. All right, we got our form. So if I were to go to add another customer role element and skip over here. Oh yeah, it's going to run. So when you run Ajax or form Ajax on the first request, Drupal always rebuilds the form when it executes. So that way it knows the form state. And then it actually triggers the submit and rebuilds it, which is why we saw that run one time and then 2 times. The second time was for each row. One thing I do realize is it copied over our input and we don't have a way to remove a condition. But I'm going to just refresh this page and turn off my stop null. So we do need to add a kind of a, let me get back to the product attributes. We should add some form of remove. So operations. Yeah, Drupal live stream. So I've been doing this. I do have a schedule. If you look on my Twitch channel, there's a schedule that I have published. It's not as dynamic as I'd wish. My website has more. But every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central, I do Drupal 10 readiness. So it's either PHP Stand Drupal, Drupal Rector, or I've also been doing the jQuery UI removal and JavaScript modernization initiative on Wednesdays. Friday, like today, kick off at 3 p.m. Central and I call these hack and plays. So I just pick something different to work on. This time I'm doing Drupal Commerce. I did something on Tugboat. Next week, I want to switch up to something different. Just anything that's fun to mess with. And on Sundays at 10 a.m. Central, I work on simplytest.me development, which is pretty fun. I'll do so. I want to copy over these operations. Also, I'm trying to get in Commerce 8.9. Well, I did a previous stream on selling files with Drupal Commerce using Commerce File. I don't know if it's on my Twitch anymore because they expire within 14 days, but it is on my YouTube. So I plan on also doing some more Drupal Commerce content, considering that I helped write 2.x. So there's a lot of knowledge that's just in my brain. And there's also some fun things I want to pick off, but it was just hard to do, like this. It was really hard to find time to build a better conditions UI because there's 5,000 other things to do. But these live streams give me a chance to just have fun and work on a few different items. So, all right. So I want to just copy in these operations and the remove, even if I don't use it right away. So if I can open the product attribute form and we have operations. So let's just add that. Oh, that's right. We're in a static method because we're in an element. So it's static, which really I could convert these T calls to new translatable markup, but we'll just take the functional shorthand. And I need to then copy in the same operation, which would be remove. Let's see. Oh, so there's where the Ajax callback comes in. But for now, we'll make it we'll do to do, make this button work. Condition form, remove. And to make sure it doesn't do anything, we'll do type of button. So if you notice here, this is a submit. If we look at the submit element, here's the big kicker. In its info, it says it executes a submit callback. If you look at the regular button, which it extends, it does not execute submit callbacks. So it lets you have a button that doesn't perform any submission of the form, but can maybe trigger other actions. So that's one way we can have the button be there, but not do anything. So let's we'll copy these few lines here of name and value. Remove this T, and also for this build form values, this is where I'm copying it from. So let's do copy reference. See here. So I do this a lot. Whenever I have a to do and I'm borrowing code from other code that's been written or I've helped write before, always link to it so that way you can find it, because I did this last week and I had to reboot my brain to figure out what I was working on. So even if I have like a 3-day break, I don't remember anything. So I always leave comments. I am a comment spammer in code and also on my merge requests, pull requests, issues, etc. Because my short-term memory is bad. I have 3 kids. I work. Can't keep track of anything. So always write stuff down, even if you think you'll remember it. So if I refresh, wrong page. I'm going to close out these other tabs. So if I refresh the promotion, we should then see condition name, settings, and operations. Let's pick customer role. And now we see this remove. Oh, I clicked on remove and it actually is going to submit the form. Oh no. So that's weird. It didn't execute the callbacks, but it still caused the form to submit. So let's add we'll add the Ajax callback into here. You know what? I guess I'm gonna have to go more in depth in this than I thought. So that's where there's this wrapper ID, and the wrapper ID replaces the table, which we have a Oh, we do have the wrapper ID up here. So let's see what the values Ajax forms, returns form values, which we can then reuse the Ajax refresh. We should be able to use the same, actually, yeah, we should be able to use the same callback here. And let's limit the validation errors to nothing, just like what was happening up here. So limit validation errors. As you can see, this said allowed roles field is required, but if we put the limit validation errors on here, it won't throw that warning. So let's go ahead and copy it into here. In access, let's remove access check. Oh, it checks if they have access to that condition or to that attribute. Because you could technically let somebody add and edit attributes without being allowed to delete attributes. Let's see, we have remove value. Let's also copy this value index. So anything behind a pound symbol is part of the render array and is part of the built form. So when it's processed, we'll actually be able to pull out this value and read it as part of the callback, which that's why here there's this remove value. So since we have a button element, this submit callback won't be called. When we make this a submit button, it will be called. So I'm just going to comment it out anyways. Remove condition submit. All right, so this should get us, oh, no, I don't want to resubmit the form. So this should get us close to having the condition name, the setting, and the ability to remove it. Customer ID. If I click remove, it should just refresh the form because we didn't actually do anything. So what I want to test is, we need a different callback because I don't know if you noticed, but it removed the select list because we didn't return enough data. See if I click add for the role. I click remove, it's only returning part of the form in the Ajax. So we need a separate Ajax callback for that. So let's get to our form. We don't want just Ajax refresh. We want a Ajax condition remove. Say Ajax conditions refresh. We'll call it that. So let's go down into the Ajax refresh. We're going to just duplicate this code. And what did I name this? Go. So I'm going to take a good guess that we need to bump this to a -3. And we'll put a stop here so that way you all can see this because not everybody may have been here last time. So in the Ajax callback, whenever there's a button or another element that triggers an Ajax operation, it has an Ajax callback. And the purpose of that callback is to return a specific part of the form to the Ajax response, and then Drupal will render it. So to help iterate that, I'm going to pop open the dev tools, make sure I got Xdebug listening, and I'll show you the commands that go through. Oh, now they actually made it easier to get to the network conditions. Sorry, I get easily distracted by new buttons. So if I close this here, so let's click on choose and we'll do customer role again. And I'm going to put in, this is the main Ajax refresh. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. So when I click add, you can see here that it does the Ajax refresh, our callback. Element parents is from the array parents of our triggering element, which was the button. And we're saying get the length minus the last 2. And this just acts like a property path from inside the form. So we're saying, hey, inside form, look at conditions, which is here, then widget, which is here, and then form. So we want you to re-render this form. If we go back into our code, we can see that the code's here. or the form has been updated. And here's the Ajax request that went through. It posted to the Ajax form wrapper, and in our response, we received updated Drupal settings that get passed in. It updated the form build ID. This is used on submit to validate the form. Think of it as like a nonce or a token. And then in insert, here is our HTML that was reinserted based on the known selector. So that's how all of that goes through. So let's click on remove and wait for our callback. So element parents, here we are. We're making, again, adjusting it to be from -2 to -3 gives us the correct path. I'm sure there's something we could add in here to be more intelligent on the triggering element. Like, was the triggering element add or was it remove? And then decide what length it should be. So I'll actually put a to do merge above, but check the triggering element for slice depth. There. Don't need to be perfect off the bat, just need to make it work. So let's, you know what, screw it. Let's just make this remove actually work. So let's change it to submit. Remove value index, remove. Now we need to define this function. Oh, if you're noticing one thing, in this callback, we're actually saying get the current class name and then Ajax conditions refresh. Drupal, and I don't know if it's a Drupal thing or it's other libraries have implemented this. You can do the shortcut of putting 2 semicolons and then the function name, and it's like it maps to this kind of condition automatically. But to be more explicit, I want to go here. If you have not seen static class before, it's the same as get called class, which you do in static methods. And if we look at the suggestion, it says use static class instead. So if that's new to you, that's all that means is get called class. So remove condition submit. Let's go ahead and add this down here. We'll add it after this Ajax callback. So we got a public static function. Do the form state interface, form state. And let's look at what the product attribute table is doing again. Now this won't be used verbatim. This is a little bit different. Oh, because it creates a delete queue, so we'll be somewhat fair with it. So let's go ahead. We can copy this line because we copied it all the same. Where we take the value index. That's why we set that value right here. So we got the value index, the value map, which we actually have conditions equals, we'll get this here, value ID would be, so we can just do that. We just need to do unset conditions, value index, and we want to set this form state rebuild. So if we do not trigger this form state rebuild, it will go from our submit callback straight to this Ajax and return the form. But by setting this form rebuild, the form will hit the submit button, then go back and rebuild the form and then pass it to the Ajax callback. And I'm missing a step here. I need to update the form state values. Now there's a chance, does this do it? It does. Because if we do form state get, it's actually passed by reference. So we may not need to do this set, and I'll be a little, we'll test it out. Let's experiment, right? Experimentation is all the fun. So let's refresh the page. I could have just clicked submit, but we'll be thorough just in case. So pick roll. You can go ahead. If you have some questions, you can ask them here and I'll go through with them. Or if you want, I actually have a, here, I'll share a link in the chat where, oh, I need to populate this data. And hey, look at, there's the live stream. So I'll share this into the forum or into the chat. If you have questions, maybe just drop a bunch in there, and maybe next week I can just do like borrow from Syntax FM and do like a potluck. So if you're not familiar with Syntax FM, it's a really cool web development podcast, mostly about front-end work, but just a lot of web technologies and other things. And every once in a while, they do these things called potlucks, where they take listener questions and then run through them and answer them. So go ahead and drop in some questions into that form, or you can get back to it from going to my site, mglomman.dev/live, and fill out some questions. And next week, I can just run through a bunch of them and try to answer them and work through them. So that way you can take some time to think about it, and I can give more attention to the questions and some better answers. All right, so let's click on remove. And I set the breakpoint. Let's see. Oh, we got an error. 1 second, let's see. Oh, we didn't get an error, but our breakpoint didn't get hit. So that's interesting. So we've got type submit, remove, submit condition, Ajax refresh condition. Let's click remove again. All right, well, that's not what is intended to happen. Let's refresh the page. All right. Customer ID. Click remove. It's not even calling our submit callback. Well, that's interesting. So maybe I'll just skip this and worry more about getting this thing to submit first. Just 1 second. I just want to read this. Type submit. I'm going to drop a breakpoint in element. So it should be type submit, name, remove value, index, remove condition, submit, limit validation errors, Ajax callback. That all looks right, except for the fact that we're calling things value instead of condition. Split and move right. Let's just remember, never be afraid to copy and paste code, so long as you like make sure you read it and understand what it's doing. Type submit, name. Like here now I'm like, did I copy something wrong? Limit validation errors. And I even get to the point where I will start to make things line up the same as they were. Static class, remove condition, submit. We know this format's working because this is being called. Huh. Yeah, so it doesn't seem to want to run. If I look at the element, that's right, we have no conditions, so nothing will be there. Okay, let's look at element and conditions, condition plugins. Oh, it's the first build, so we don't have anything yet. At submit button ran. Now this is being processed. Here we go. So remove, name, value 0, remove, limit validation errors. Submit, we've got that function and the callback. No idea why it's being so finicky. I'll look at the database logs real quick. And maybe I'll go into the rabbit hole of finding out why. But first, I think I'd rather try and get this to work. So let's see what happens when I submit the form. With that value. So we have submit condition, set value for element. I'm going to put a pause there, or a breakpoint there. Close some of this. Oh no, actually I want this to still stay because for some reason it wasn't running. I'm going to leave that comment there and make a to-do demo that form state Does all the things by reference. All right, so little note for later. Oh, here we go. This is why call user func array expects parameter 1 to be a valid callback. Function remove condition submit not found or invalid function name. Well, that's a lie because it is right here. Public static function looks valid to me. Let's try not doing it this way and doing, I know why. All right, so what I did wrong here is the submit render key value is supposed to be an array, and I did not pass it. So submit expects an array of callbacks. What did I do? I literally passed the class name and then I passed the method name as callbacks. When really I need this to be passed to call func array because we're taking the class and then the method name. That's why it didn't run, because I didn't think and wrap this inside of an array value. So now we'll be able to do the remove condition submit and test a few things out. So let's click remove. We have here the remove condition submit conditions is now 0. And as we saw in this get, it's passing it by reference. So if we look at form state, it's in the storage condition plugins. Oh, so I would have to actually then, I see. So it having the ampersand for reference over there means that I could continue passing by reference if I added the ampersand there, which I don't like doing. I find this to be much cleaner. So let's go ahead and add that there. Let's click remove, and it should set the storage element parents. Let's press play, and woohoo, we removed the condition. So now we have the remove button working. So let's move on to seeing if this saves correctly. Let's click save. All right, values. So here in our values, we've got target plugin ID is order email. Configuration is null. That's not good because we have there's a value here. And it renamed the promotion to be my name. Thank you, autocomplete, for doing that. All right. So previously I had the database open. I need to do ddev describe to get the database port number because it is Docker, so it changes on every time I restart it. So let me get that connected here real quick. So I use Phpstorm, and one of the reasons I love using it is the built-in database workbench, where I have it connected to the Docker instance, localhost. All I have to do is just update the port ID. You could dedicate a port ID so that way it's always the same, but I find little issue in copying the port ID and then updating this here. So what I can do is, since promotions are an entity, we actually have conditions as a field, and our entity ID is 3. Entity ID equals 3. And how I know that is from last time, but also it's right there in the URL. So yeah, we can see we have delta 0, which delta in Drupal is like what index it is in a field value, because delta is the change, so the order of change. Order email and no value. So that's the next step to figure out, is why it did not carry over the value from that entry. So let's again peer into the product attribute form. See how things are going on there. So user input. So one thing in Drupal is the form state is based off of when a button is submitted. and is not representative of the post data. That's where user input comes in. And Drupal does this kind of checking of user input against a known form to create the form state, which means that somebody can't necessarily like pollute your form with fake data and it gets submitted. So let's go into here. So we have the value form. It looks like this user input is part of the weight sorting. We have the remove, and we have the value form entity. So we have all of this data here. Access handler, add new, reset, and then it returns the form. Remove value, submit, save values. So this deletes things in the delete queue, form state, get value, values. So maybe maybe that's part of it, where before I was just getting it from the form state status. Let's go ahead and, it's not even loading them here. So that's one problem too. We know we have a form state item. We have a value in here. Oh, so you have not used DDev. So I've been using, previously I created my own local Docker setup called Platform Docker. And I used that and a few other folks did. And then I got sick of maintaining it. And I got sick of also working with Docker Compose. Then I found DDev. I personally like DDev over Lando. I do sponsor both projects. Well, I did DDev, but it's currently the company behind it has shut its doors, but the local tool moves on, and I will pick up back my sponsorship for it once that settles. But it's just, I think Lando is great for folks who are new to Docker because it does install Docker. It provides a more guided wrapper around Docker, where I like DDev because if I want to, I can go into DDev and I can add my own files into here and make it a little bit, I can actually work with Docker Compose when I want to or not when I don't want to. Drupal VM. So Drupal VM I used to use, well, actually I didn't use Drupal VM, I used Vagrant, but then I ran out of disk space. So I've been using Docker for 7 or 8 years. All I know is it's back when boot to Docker was a thing. And that's just because I ran out of disk space with Vagrant and it was too hard to have too many environments open at the same time. So I've been using Docker for a long, long, long time. All right, so I need to figure out why this table is empty when we know we have a condition in the database. So let's load up here. So conditions, form state get conditions. So here's the problem right now is it's not even respecting the values. So let's look at the conditions element and see where I went wrong. So default value. Okay, so we need to grab it from the default value. So let's see, am I doing that? I'm not even doing that. So let's put a breakpoint right at the beginning. Let's do that at the actual beginning. So element, default value, here we go. So let's see. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. So what we could do is, I wonder if this is good enough. If we could do element default value. So if the form state hasn't had the conditions plugins stashed into it, we'll just pull from the default value of the element, which on any Ajax operation, this gets committed. So I think we should be okay. I'm going to turn off the xdebug breakpoint just to make it a little bit faster. I got an error. So much for being faster. So let's press play. And if I step over, so conditions, plugin configuration. Where does the error happen? So let's go here. Step over. We have, because they're different values. All right. So the way that something's not right there. Let's see. Or something is right, I suppose. Default value for each definition says plugin ID. So it's just mapping it differently when this is created. And if we look at the parent widget, so here we go. This is how it passes in the values. So it does plugin ID and configuration instead of target plugin ID and target plugin configuration. So I wonder why we have it set that way. But we can map around it. So let's see in here. So how about we do this a different way? So we'll do if conditions equal to null, because inside this get, it's null if the property does not exist. We'll say conditions equals array map static closure array value return. And all of this is to ensure that we have the target plugin ID and target plugin configuration values here, which maybe I don't need it to be this complicated. Hold on. I feel like I'm over engineering at the moment. So let's see if we can just get this to work the right way. So conditions, not the right way, but with the way it's working. Let me go back to this form element parent. So it has plugin and configuration. So that's why it broke, because that was invalid. So if we change this to be plugin and we change this to be configuration as the plugin ID and the plugin configuration, we should no longer have an error here. Nope, we have a fatal error. Let's look at the backtrace. Arguments, invalid argument passed to for each on line 109. Did I not? There we go. I forgot to put that back. So let's make this plugin, and we'll make this be configuration, because that's what comes in from the default values. If we refresh, where does this error come from? Undefined index target plugin ID on line 122. Yep, because that is now plugin. So what I should do is let's look for target plugin ID. So here we need to change this to be called plugin, and we need this to be called configuration. So I'm guessing that in this widget, it massages the form values here. So it says for each values form, if not is set plugin, and then it says target plugin ID and target plugin configuration. And I had overridden that here to just return values form. So let's delete that. We'll keep the same massage form values here. So this is something that all widgets have as a way to take the form data and turn it into the values that the field expects. So all fields have this. Usually it just returns the values raw, but as you can see, a lot of commerce related items have this here. It's like address converts the address, a few things like that. So let's go back to our element here. Oh yeah, target plugin ID, nothing found. Configuration, target plugin, nothing. All right, so we should be more in line with the parent element. which is what I intended to do. I want this to be a drop-in replacement without a lot of workarounds. So let's just hit play. And ta-da! All right, here we go. So now we have the element here, and that's not going to work because it's a email element. Yeah, it keeps putting in my name. So let's hit save. And massage form values for the widget. So if is set values form. So this is interesting that it's got form mail and condition plugins. This is not right at all. So let's stop there. Something's not right. The submit conditions didn't even get called, which is what it's supposed to do. So 1 second, I want to check something. So add new condition. We don't want to do that. Plugin configuration. So up in our info, we have this commerce element submit, which is submit conditions. And the conditions element has this as well, where it ensures that the values are matched up. So it sets the value for the element, and that should be called before the widget gets submitted. Let's look at the admin reports. We'll look at the database log real quick to see if any errors came in. And see if that has any secrets. All right, undefined index. This might be old, so let's go ahead and delete all. I really missed one thing from Drupal 7. It had the delete button on this main page, so you didn't have to like go to a separate page then bounce back. It was a little bit faster. All right, so we've got that. Let's refresh this form and see if we can get this to work. I'm only going to be doing this under half. Usually I do these for 2 hours, but I'm only going to go until 4:30 Central, which is in half an hour, because we got tickets to a local baseball game for the Kenosha Kingfish. So we're going to, actually our kids don't even know. So we'll be surprising them with a baseball game. All right, so we have the email set. We got Xdebug ready to go. Submit conditions should be called before the massage form values. Let's see. I want to check. It could be also, what is the name here? Conditions form mail. So that might be part of it. Is we have in this table, we select the parents. So maybe this is part of the problem too, is we're setting the wrong parents. And the parents key is what defines the value here. So let's look at the original conditions element and how it sets the parents. So inline form is here. The parents is array merge, elements, parents, category ID, plugin ID, configuration. So I think what we need to do is, let's copy this. What cord is loose? So I have a cord loose by my feet. I don't know how it got there. So we're going to do array merge. We're going to take the parents and then another array that contains our current index and the configuration name. I think that should give us the plugin ID, possibly. Or we could do another one. So we should name this configuration, give it that parent, And I wonder if we need another one, a hidden one called plugin. And this will be a... So Drupal has another element called value. And the idea is that this is just a value that's not displayed. So it's not like using input hidden. It's something that's not even rendered on the front end. It's just a back-end value that gets passed during form submit. So we're going to have this value be the condition plugin. So this will be the plugin ID that's added. And then we have our configuration here. Let's have the parents be updated and see if this makes a difference. And the way we can tell is if we refresh the page and look at the name for the input element. Or we get an error. So backtrace, Drupal error handler, undefined index settings on conditions table 133. That's what I get for modifying this without updating all the references. All right, get this to load. And hopefully this means that we can get the values to save as well, and like an open form. And then we could figure out doing like a table drag, and then even a cog, so that way you edit and it shows like a summary overview of the different conditions. This does not want to go. Here we are. All right, I can close the dev tools. Oh, hold on. Oh, interesting. Even though this value is hidden, it's causing the entire table to render differently. So I believe what we can do is, I saw it on product attribute form. They have the column span defined on the header. So let's do that. Or I don't want to copy the entire thing. Again, we're going to split it right. So I don't know if Phpstorm always allowed you to just drag the columns and split it. I thought you always had to right click and click the option. Because I know in VS Code you can just do that. So I'm really excited that you can do that in Phpstorm now, or if you always did, I didn't know. So let's update this header to be data is the name and call span is 2, and see if that fixes our messed up table here. And so it does. Great. Let's change the email and click save. So we have our massage form values. Again, it's hitting before the element does. So that's interesting. So if we step over, see, so new values has the order email, form, target configuration form. That's, we don't want that to be form. Because it needs to just be mail. So if I hit play, we get values is null. Go figure. But if we look at form state, we get the values, conditions, form. Oh, so we do have it here. All right, so let's see in here where, how did it get the value? Submit conditions. Form state get value from the parents. So it'd be form state get value, and we'll do element parents. Because if we look at the element parents, again, it's all about finding the structure. So parents is, so array parents is the array property path inside the form array, and parents is inside of the form state values. That's a key difference there. So here we have conditions form, we'd have conditions form, and we would get our values correct. So let's do that. And another trick we can do is element children values. So what this helper does, it basically just strips out everything that's not that the key. This might add extra processing, so maybe not. But the idea is to strip out anything that has the hash symbol in front of it, not hash, pound sign. We want the key to always be an integer. And sort, we don't want to sort or return array keys. No. Oh, okay, yeah, we definitely don't want this because that's going to return the keys. So we'll just do, we can do array filter the values and static function. Let's do key. We'll do array filter use key. So we're going to tell array filter to give us the keys, and we'll do return key not equal, or return is int key. So we'll filter out our values based on if it is a integer. We'll try that out. So let's go ahead and resubmit. Luckily, a lot of times when you mess with a submit handler, you can just refresh the form and go through those motions. I'm going to put a breakpoint just at the end. So new values. Again, we have target plugin ID. This configuration form is not quite complete, but it even has a note here. This method is invoked during validation with incomplete values. The form element can't set the right values until form submit. So maybe this is expected. If I hit play, now we're in our element submit. We have our values, which is 0, add new, condition plugins. We just want these are going to go away. But since they're buttons, they get included as part of the form state. But what we really want is this array of values, which is why we have our filter. So if we step over, we'll see now that our values only have things that we care about. Those other items are now stripped away. And we're going to set the value for the element here. So if we look at form state and the values, and we go to conditions, form, we have all this here. If I step over, you'll now see that it is just the modified values. So let's hit play. Our new values should be an array that has the proper configuration. And if we go back to the database table, there we go. We have the serialized configuration. And if we go back to our promotion that got renamed, we should see it pre-filled. So that's cool. So now we have it working. Let's try adding another one. Let's add another customer email. Uh-oh. Wait a second. Did I click the wrong Xdebug button? Did I click stop instead of play? Oh, I must have. I must have clicked stop instead of a playthrough. I'll just make this test at example.com. Let's click save. And our values, we have an array and the configuration is there. So we'll go ahead, hit play. And if we go back and we edit, we should see it there. So again, some of this is not necessarily hard. It's just through the years, have had to work on a lot of this in Drupal Commerce. So I know where the quirks lie. And that's why I think it's really interesting that I got to do this work on the live stream, is to hopefully show some of the internals with the Form API and Ajax and how it all works. A lot of it is just understanding what a triggering element is. That's any element that caused an Ajax refresh. Only buttons cause a full form rebuild. So if like this select list actually causes an Ajax, it's not going to cause the form to rebuild. So you actually can't do any further Ajax operations in anything it provides. you need a button to be triggered to help commit the form state. So that's a quirk. As we went through here, as you saw, returning the proper array length. So that way the correct render array was returned and rendered. Making sure we do the form state rebuild here and setting the form state value. So there's a whole lot of other components here. And yeah, so that's one reason I'm also doing it too, is to see, like, let people see my thought process and how I do things, and also that I'm human. I've had some people ask me, like, how do you get all this done? I'm like, I don't know. I've done the same thing 100 times, and eventually you just learn the mistakes and remember it. I also have this knack where I can't remember. I could go into the grocery store and forget the 2 items my wife told me about as I walked out the door, but somebody could talk about a bug, and I'm like, oh, I remember 5 years ago, I had this happen. It's just my brain works in a certain way. So I want to try to, just go through this and let people see how I work and how I do things, and hopefully help some people beat imposter syndrome, right? Like, how many times did I screw up here because I renamed something and I forgot to fix it somewhere? Like, it happens. I've lost like 3 days over small problems like that, where I come back, I take a break, I'm like, oh, well, I could have saved a lot of time and a lot of money by fixing it. But you know what? It's software development. No one's perfect. It's all accidents happen. So we have this. Let's test the remove and make sure the right one gets removed, which it did not. So let's go ahead and debug that. So we have our add new condition and remove condition submit, and see if we can figure out why that didn't happen. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've got xdebug listening, and I'll click remove. So the value index is 0. Get the conditions are null. Oh, well then, we'll look here. So whenever you use set and get, it sets it into the storage. Oh, I know why. So this is the first load. And on the first load, this is never set. This form state is never set. We just get this here. So I'm going to refactor this code a little bit. So let's do this here. So if conditions is equal to null, conditions equals this, form state set condition plugins to conditions on first load. Make sure we have the default value respected and stored in the form state for further Ajax operations. So we didn't commit this. So yeah, we didn't commit this into the form state. So that's why on the first Ajax operation, it came back with an empty array, or it came back with null, because we were just saying, oh, if it's a miss, great, just take the default value. But we weren't allowing that data to be passed on down the stack. And maybe there's a way we can refactor this to work around this form state and actually use the values. But when first working on it, this is what I did, and it worked. One thing that I do want to show, maybe VS Code has this, is they added a lot of grammar tools into Phpstorm. So if I look at more actions, you can see here, they've always actually, take that back, they've always had spell checking. But they've recently added, I want to show this because it's pretty cool, and maybe it will pop up, is they've added grammar checking. So let's see if it catches anything in here. It might not, since it's excluded. Yeah, so here, it's using the language tool, which is an open source grammar solution. And it actually gives you the green squiggly, like if you were in Word or LibreOffice, and lets you provide better passive rule fixes. So that's really cool. So as we write our documentation in code, our editors can make us write good code, or like write good words that are more easily understood. All right, so let's try removing a value on the first load. And normally I do test-driven development where I'd write the functional JavaScript test that goes in and clicks everything. But that's kind of hard when you're building something new like this. Like this user interface didn't exist, so it's kind of hard to write the test and then also debug it. So I usually like to go this approach, and then once I get it pretty much done, then I write my test, because otherwise it's not as fast. When I'm doing something that's more functional and doesn't have a user interface, it's a lot easier. To me, it's easier to use test-driven development. But when we're building this complex interface, this is a lot easier just to go in and hack at it. Also, it's easier for teaching, like in this live stream. All right, so we've got our remove submit condition. The value index is 0. And now we actually have our conditions array. So I can hit play. And we remove the value. I'm going to click save. And if we go into the database, we see that entity ID 3 has only the test@example.com email address. So that's actually, I'm pretty excited about that. So I've got 10 minutes before I need to hop off and get ready to go to the ball game. So that sounds like it's a good time to try to get the draggable widget in to make this rearrangeable, like in the product attributes. We'll see what we can do in 10 minutes. I like to set constraints. So again, what I want to recreate is on this page, you get this dragger so you can rearrange the items. So let's see if we can do that. All right. So what I'll do to make this a little bit faster, I'm going to add back in another condition. Let's pick something different. So this promotion will only give, since it renamed to my name, this will only give a fixed amount off if this email is here and you spend more than $10. Why not? Let's save it and validate that that saves. And then we'll try to make it so they can be rearranged. Again, let's check order total price. Oh, I love it when things work and you think that there'd be more work to do. Good morning, caveman crafting. I don't know what time zone. I'm assuming you must be in the Australia or New Zealand area for it to be morning there, because it is a lovely 4 in the afternoon here. But thanks for, Philippines. Well, thanks for tuning in and spending your Saturday morning here. That's always the time zones are wild. It is like, explaining to like my kids, I have a 10, a 5, and a 20-month-year-old. So like talking to my 10-year-old about like time zones. Like I remember being a kid and thinking, driving up north in Wisconsin felt like I was like crossing the country. Like being a kid and not knowing the, like how big the world is. Like I think that's the coolest part about our development community and knowing people all across the world is like I can tell that to my kid and like his mind's already expanded and he knows so much more than I did as a kid. So I'm hoping that gives him even more opportunities than, I made for myself. Just knowing like the world is a bigger place and there are people in different time zones. Like when he's going to bed, somebody's halfway through their day. All right, let's try to get this table drag in. I'm going to drag this over to the right so we can try to do some quick copy and paste. So we have the build values form. That's what we need here. Build values form. The table, we have weight. I know we need to copy this in. So let's go ahead and we'll add it after settings. And I need to remember that. So we have the condition name, which this will need a bump to 3. Remember, I had to bump it to 2 because I have a hidden, the ID is hidden. So we have now to bump it to 3 to match how this is bumped to 2. That will make sense in just a moment because there's a hidden dragger. Well, the dragger's not hidden, but it adds room for the hand, the drag icon. So group, we'll change this to be condition. We'll call it condition order weight. And I need to silence my phone because I'm getting probably somebody asking me about my car warranty. I don't know if that's a problem in other countries, but in the United States, we have this really horrible problem with robocalls about your car warranty or the Visa MasterCard card services, which it's like, come on, Visa and MasterCard are two different companies. Why would somebody be calling on behalf of both of them? Like, it's just absurd. All right, so we've copied, sorry, tangent. Oh, that must be nice that you don't have robocalls here there in the UK because they are an abomination here in the United States. All right, so we've got the header, we've got the table drag element added. Earlier, I looked into this. In the table render element, there is the table drag. It's documented in here. In pre-render, it checks if this exists. It attached the JavaScript and all of that. I can dive more into that later. I did on the last stream a bit, trying to read into it. So we've got the table drag. Oh yeah, we need to copy this right here. So table drag element is always added to the first cell, which is why we need to bump up the column span. So let's go and add that right here. Just do a good copy paste and rename condition form to be, or rename these to be condition form. We have to add a class draggable and then add a empty table drag column because it gets added to the first column. And then after settings, we have a weight. So that would go right here. And we'll just copy this and make this be a static call, default weight and max weight. Oh, we got a few things to copy over. Oh, so group. So this group matches a class here. So that's where this comes into play. Default weight and max weight. So let's see here. Oh, okay. So max weight is the count. So let's do that. We'll do the same thing. So max weight equals count conditions. And inside commerce, the product attribute values actually have a weight value for ordering. So we'll have the default weight be the max weight if it's new. Otherwise, it gets it from the entity. So what we'll have the default weight be is the index. So we'll just have the weight equal the index value as it goes through. We'll see how that works. So I think that's it. Yeah, we copied all that in. You sort by weight property to sort the rows. Used by, oh, so this is used by. So this inside of commerce, we have this reset to alphabetical. So I think that's what's going on here as part of this user input. Let's make a note. Oh, value form weight. Wait a second. So it's got, oh, sorry, I see here. So value form weight is the default weight. Input weight. Oh, okay. User input. So let's copy. You know what? Let's just make a to-do need to add weight value. So let's just refresh because I've got 3 minutes. I just want to see it in the user interface and then I can tidy it up. So what's happening in here is there does need to be a weight property attached. And what is going through, let me bring it to the main group. Oh, no, bring it. There we go. So what it's trying to do is it's reading the user input. So basically the post data to see if the index is set. If it is, it will find the proper value to set. And I guess what we could do is just copy this to make sure it's always set to the default weight. See product attribute form for reading from user input. Make a @c. So let's just try that. Maybe it just works. We'll find out. Oh, value form. Yeah, it's condition form. So we gotta make sure I copy that over correctly. And let's refresh. Hey, the table drag's there. All right, so let's try just. So I made the current order total be first. Let's save and see if it saves the order by some random chance. So if I go back and edit, hey, it worked. I'm pleasantly surprised and can't believe it. So so you can see here that the delta actually changed. And if I save, so this is one thing that I brought up in a recent interview that will go out for the contribution days next week, is there's lots of talk about low code platforms. And that conversation about low code platforms are usually like drag and drop wizards that let you do things without writing code to design a page. I guess you could consider this a lot of code, but the fact is that we did a little bit. Like we leveraged quite a bit, and we were able to get that kind of a user interface. You can see that the delta changed and they rearranged. I've always felt that Drupal is low code, whether it's because of the site builder efforts, which yeah, those atrophied a bit since, you know, Drupal 7. I'd say Drupal 7, it was a lot of site builder and like low code. Drupal 8 did become a lot of backend developer focused, but you know, we wrote one class file, and we were able to build this interface without writing any HTML. There's no JavaScript. We didn't write any JavaScript in this. You know, this add button, thanks to the states API, is disabled until the value is not empty. And I didn't write any JavaScript for this. So I do feel that Drupal is extremely powerful and low code for developers. It just needs to play catch up for the site. I don't even like to use the word site builder anymore, like marketing, content editors. It's that market that hasn't really received a lot of the love and the low code effort. But the fact that we've just built a reactive Ajax form with quirks, right? There are some quirks to it, just there are with React if you try to maintain state for a large form. But we were able to build this and toggle like the weight here without writing any JavaScript and just leverage the Form API and Form Ajax. So that's really neat. I'm actually really impressed that we could get this going. And one of the reasons that this feature was brought up is for building order ranges. So we want to give $3 off if the order is greater than $10, but let's say we want it to be also less than $50. So you have a range. Now we have the ability to create ranges where a promotion applies if the order is greater than 10 and less than 50. With a little bit of work, we could add these to shipping methods. So I'm actually pretty excited about this. I don't think this to do is needed. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied about this. The next thing I want to do is, before I leave out, I'll kind of like tease the next step. So let's look at all the instances of table drag, and let's see, in the theme.inc, we have order, draggable. Let's see, this is also order relationship sibling. Somewhere in here, table drag match relationship parent. So with the book module, which isn't used as much, you can actually start nesting things. So maybe it's under taxonomy. Actually, taxonomy doesn't even have it listed. Maybe they have their own instance of it. But there's or maybe in menu. So here we go. So in the menu, right? Action match relationship parent, group menu parent, subgroup menu parent, blah, blah, blah. What all that means is we can do, let's go to the tools. We'll go to tools because that's probably got more links in it. Hopefully I'm not wrong. I am wrong. Administration. Here we go. So this table drag can do more than just order things up and down like we see here. You know, this is a table drag and we're able to move stuff all the way around. What it can let you do when this loads is you can group things. So you can move things underneath a parent. You could bring it out of a parent. You can move it all over the place. So the idea would be to put that back is to allow editing these conditions. And if they're nested, they act as an and. So if we could put, right now it's an or rather right now it's controlled by this radio button that says all conditions must pass. What if we could get rid of that? And this current order condition was nested under the first one. So as if this triggers and anything nested underneath it. So that would be really interesting if we can go into there. And that's like rebuilding the rules module inside of Commerce, which Commerce had to make that decision 5 years ago because rules didn't exist. So thanks for tuning in. I need to go get ready for the ball game. And like I said, I'll be back on Sunday doing some simplytest.me. Next Wednesday, I'll be either doing jQuery UI removal in Drupal 10 or working on Drupal Rector for the Drupal 10 readiness. And back on this on Friday. So thanks for tuning in. It's always a pleasure. I'm glad y'all enjoy it because I enjoy it too. So have a good one. Bye.